picture a man, right, pulling his chin over a metal bar.
Okay.
Now picture him doing it again. And again, like imagine the skin on his palms blistering and just tearing open.
Oh, man. And bleeding, yeah.
But he doesn't stop. I mean, he keeps pulling 4,030 times over 17 grueling hours.
Which is just unbelievable.
Right? Until he breaks the Guinness World Record. Or, picture that same man running 205 miles in 39 hours nonstop.
That completely flips the traditional biological narrative.
Exactly. Your legs are screaming, your kidneys are literally failing, your mind is begging for mercy, but you just keep running.
Yeah.
This isn't a scene from a Hollywood action movie. This is the documented reality of David Goggins.
It is the absolute definition of pushing the human body and mind far beyond what sports science usually considers the breaking point.
Right.
I mean, we're looking at a man who has completed over 70 extreme endurance races, conquered the brutal Badwater 135 in Death Valley, and graduated from Navy SEAL BUD/S training.
Which is widely considered the most demanding military selection process on Earth.
Exactly. And he did it not once, but 3 times.
Which is insane. We usually view pain as a hard stop, right? Like a warning light indicating that the machine is breaking down.
Yeah, but Goggins uses it completely differently.
Right. So today we are going on a deep dive into the architecture of extreme human endurance. We are stepping into the mind of an elite mindset coach, a performance psychologist, and a Navy SEAL trainer to deconstruct Goggins' book, Can't Hurt Me.
And the mission for this deep dive is really clear.
Yeah.
By the end of this conversation, we're going to hand you a complete mental toughness framework. We extracted this directly from Goggins' 10 challenges.
So we are going to examine the precise psychological mechanisms of how you forge your mind into an absolute weapon.
And crucially, we will also analyze the psychological dangers of this extreme mindset.
Because building the ultimate weapon of the mind requires understanding its power, but also, the heavy physiological toll it can take if you don't wield it safely over a lifetime.
Spot on. So, to understand how a weapon is forged, you first have to look at the raw, unrefined iron.
You have to understand the initial trauma.
Right. We're starting with his origin in Challenge 1, which he calls the bad cards.
Because before he was a Navy SEAL, David Goggins was a 300-pound exterminator, spraying for cockroaches at night, reading at a 3rd grade level, and facing pre-diabetes.
The sheer density of trauma in his early life is, well, it's staggering.
Yeah.
Born in Buffalo, New York, he endured a deeply abusive father. And the toxic stress from that home environment was so severe, it neurologically impacted his development.
Wow.
Yeah, it caused him to develop a severe stutter and essentially halted his cognitive learning.
That's rough. And then, after his mother escaped with him to rural Indiana, he faced vicious, organized Ku Klux Klan racism.
As the only African-American kid in his school, he routinely found racial slurs painted on his notebook and his car.
It is the textbook definition of a bad hand. And most of us, if we are dealt those cards, we hide them. Right?
Oh, absolutely.
We bury the trauma, or, completely understandably, we use it as the foundational reason why we can't get ahead in life.
Right. It becomes the ultimate excuse.
But Goggins demands the exact opposite. He insists you take an inventory of every single limitation, every trauma, every insecurity. You actually write down your bad cards.
And the psychological shift he's teaching here is about reclaiming the locus of control.
Okay, break that down for me.
Well, when you hide from your past, it controls you unconsciously. It becomes a shadow that dictates your fears and hesitations.
Like it's pulling the strings behind the scenes.
Exactly. When you write it down in excruciating detail, you force that trauma into the light. You give your pain a tangible shape.
You stop being the passive victim of your circumstances.
Right, and you start metabolizing that exact trauma into combustible fuel for your metamorphosis. Self-deception is the ultimate enemy of high performance.
I like to compare this to doing a soil test before planting a garden. Yeah.
Well, that's a good analogy.
You can't grow anything until you brutally analyze exactly how toxic the dirt is. But wait, why is giving shape to our pain the mandatory first step for high performers? Why can't we just adopt a positive mindset and move forward?
Because ignoring the pain creates a fragile psychological foundation. Toxic positivity is just a house of cards. Discomfort and facing raw reality create the necessary baseline for actual transformation.
So if you build your ambitious goals on the illusion that everything is fine,
then the first moment you encounter severe friction, whether that's at a marathon or a startup venture or a relationship, your mind just shatters.
Right.
Goggins teaches that you must absorb the reality of your darkest moments so they become a known quantity. a source of leverage rather than a hidden vulnerability waiting to ambush you.
Okay, but mapping out that toxic soil is only the diagnostic phase, right? Once you've mapped it out, you have to look the gardener in the eye.
That brings us to the daily application of discipline.
Which is challenge 2, the accountability mirror, and challenge 3, callousing the mind.
Yeah, this is where the framework translates from abstract psychology to a daily physical practice.
So what is the accountability mirror?
Challenge 2 requires you to take Post-it notes and stick them on your bathroom mirror.
Okay.
And these notes detail your goals and your flaws without an ounce of sugarcoating. If you look in the mirror and you're overweight, you write down, "I am fat."
Really?
Yes. If you're uneducated, you write down that you need to study because you aren't smart enough yet.
Okay, I have to push back here. Doesn't modern psychology constantly preach self-love? Isn't looking in the mirror and calling yourself fat or lazy just toxic self-abuse?
Well, you've hit on the core paradox of this philosophy, and it's what most people completely misunderstand about this chapter.
How so?
There's a massive psychological difference between self-pity and brutal self-accountability. Goggins isn't telling you to hate yourself.
It sounds like it, though.
I know, but he's actually telling you to completely abolish your ego. Your ego's primary job is to protect you from uncomfortable truths. It rationalizes your failures.
I'm not overweight, I just have big bones, that kind of thing.
Exactly. The accountability mirror is a tool to strip away the ego. It is perfectly safe and even necessary to be completely ruthless with your self-assessment, but only if the singular intent is improvement.
So it's like tactical honesty.
That's a great way to put it. You aren't insulting yourself to degrade your self-worth. You are diagnosing a critical error in your operating system so you can patch it.
Got it.
And that leads directly into challenge 3, callousing the mind.
Right, like physical calluses on your hand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just like a weightlifter's hands build physical calluses to protect against the friction of the barbell, your brain needs neurological calluses to protect against mental friction.
And how do you build those?
You build these by intentionally doing one thing that sucks every single day.
So it could be making your bed with military precision the second you wake up, or, ironing your clothes perfectly, or getting up before dawn to run 2 miles in the freezing rain.
It's about deliberately stepping into the discomfort zone.
Okay, let's turn this into an actionable system for you, the listener. How does this apply to business or studying?
Well, facing the mirror forces you to break massive, intimidating goals, like losing 40 pounds or starting a company into ruthless micro-habits.
So you write on the Post-it, lose 2 pounds this week.
Yeah. And when you hit that target, you take the note down and write the next one. It's a localized daily war against complacency.
So the fear being attacked here is just the fundamental human fear of discomfort.
Precisely. The average person's mind is biologically wired to seek the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
To conserve energy.
Right.
By forcing yourself to do what you hate daily, you are literally rewiring your brain's baseline tolerance for stress.
Okay, the mirror prepares you for the battle. But pushing through a daily chore is one thing. What happens when you are actually in the trenches?
When things get really dark.
Yeah. Like when you are on mile 70 of an ultramarathon or hour 16 of a high-stakes coding sprint, and your body and mind are absolutely screaming at you to quit.
That is the threshold where we explore Challenge 7, the 40% rule.
This is the core of his philosophy.
The absolute core. It's about pushing past the illusion of limits.
I always compare the brain to a high-performance car engine. A lot of sports cars come from the factory with a governor, an electronic speed limiter.
I'm right.
It's a computer chip that cuts the engine's power when you hit, say, 155 miles per hour, long before the engine would actually overheat or blow up. It does this strictly for safety.
And Goggins argues our brains have a factory-installed governor, too.
Exactly.
The biological mechanism there is grounded in the central governor theory of fatigue. Your brain monitors your physiological state, and when it perceives that you are depleting your resources, it generates the sensation of pain and extreme fatigue.
To force you to stop.
Right. But Goggins's rule states that when you hit that wall of pain and doubt, when your mind is telling you that you have absolutely nothing left, you are actually only at 40% of your maximum physical capacity.
Wait, only 40%?
Yes. The governor is kicked in purely to protect you from perceived danger, not actual danger. The mental shift is recognizing that the pain is a biological suggestion, not a mechanical mandate.
So your job is to push just 5 to 10% further.
Exactly.
If your absolute maximum number of push-ups is 100, do 105. If you run 30 miles a week, run 33. You systematically stretch your pain tolerance without destroying yourself.
That's the actionable system.
But, okay, in that moment of blinding agony, how do you psychologically unlock that extra 10%?
That requires the cognitive interventions found in Challenge 6, the cookie jar, and Challenge 5, the armored mind.
Tell me about the cookie jar.
Your cookie jar is your personal mental trophy room. When the pain hits and the governor demands you stop, you actively reach into your memory and pull out a vivid recollection of a past obstacle you've overcome.
Like quitting smoking.
Yeah, or overcoming a childhood stutter. Or a time you failed a massive project and fought your way back to win.
So you are literally using past suffering to manufacture adrenaline and dopamine in the present moment.
Which overrides the panic signals coming from your amygdala.
Wow.
High performers don't just sit around visualizing the finish line with a gold medal around their neck. The Armored Mind framework requires you to visualize the challenges that will inevitably arise.
So you visualize the exact moment your legs cramp.
Right, or the moment your investor pulls out. And you prepare the precise, hardened response you will give yourself when the darkness closes in.
You have to know your deepest why to stay in the fight when the fight gets ugly.
Exactly.
But pushing past the 40% rule in an endurance race is a purely physical threshold. How does this translate to daily life, careers, and inevitable failures?
He builds highly practical, ruthless systems for that, too. Let's look at Challenge 8, which addresses cognitive fatigue and scheduling.
Okay.
He asks you to audit your time for an entire week, document every single minute, then build an optimal schedule by blocking your life into focused 15 to 30-minute intervals.
And stop multitasking.
You completely stop multitasking.
Because task switching absolutely destroys the prefrontal cortex's ability to maintain deep focus. Multitasking creates a nation of half-asses.
Which leads directly into Challenge 4, taking souls.
Taking souls? That sounds intense.
It is. You pick a competitive, even hostile situation. Maybe it's a micromanaging boss, a difficult professor, or a fierce business rival.
Okay.
You find the exact standard they set for you, and you relentlessly, aggressively over-deliver. You work so obsessively that you don't just meet their expectations, you earn their profound respect and completely dominate the task.
I struggle with the taking souls concept, though. I mean, it sounds exhausting to constantly view your peers or your boss as adversaries.
It does.
Doesn't that just breed workplace toxicity and paranoia? How does a performance psychologist justify that level of manufactured conflict?
It's a valid concern, but it's important to understand it's an internal game, not external hostility.
What do you mean?
It's not about being toxic to them. It's about manipulating your own motivational circuitry. When someone doubts you, your brain naturally registers a social threat, which usually causes anxiety or withdrawal.
Sure.
Taking souls redirects that threat response. You take their negativity, their doubt, or their unreasonable demands, and you use it as clean-burning fuel. You aren't fighting them. You are weaponizing their doubt to elevate your own standard.
Ah, I get it. You turn external friction into internal momentum.
Exactly. And you can't ever let off the gas. That's Challenge 9, being uncommon amongst the uncommon.
Torching complacency.
Yes. Goggins warns heavily against the shrinking comfort zone of success. Most people would be thrilled just to pass Navy SEAL Buds training once.
But Goggins did it 3 times, including going through Hell Week on fractured kneecaps.
Right. And then he went to Army Ranger School and became enlisted honor man, which means he was the absolute top graduate of his entire class.
And then, as if that wasn't enough, in 2026, at the age of 51, he re-enlisted in the Air Force Special Warfare Training Wing.
51. The psychological lesson is that greatness evaporates the moment you think you've arrived.
Wow.
You have to constantly seek out environments where you are no longer the best, where you are a novice surrounded by masters and dominate there too.
It transforms your entire life into a strategic military operation.
Yeah.
And in any kinetic operation, there are casualties and failures.
Which brings us to Challenge 10, the empowerment of failure.
The after-action report.
Yes. When you fail, you don't wallow. You document what went right, what went wrong, and how your mindset was.
You fix the strategic issue, and you immediately try again.
It's a cognitive reappraisal strategy. By writing the after-action report, you remove the heavy emotion and shame from defeat. You shift your brain from the emotional center to the logical, analytical center.
So failure simply becomes data collection for the next assault.
Precisely.
Okay, so we've built the ultimate weapon of the mind. We are calloused, we are accountable, we are taking souls and bypassing the biological governor. But what happens if you never put the weapon down?
That is the million-dollar question.
Yeah. Is it possible to go too far?
This is a vital counter-perspective. We have to explore a critique by performance coach Jamin Fraser regarding midlife motivation.
Okay, let's hear it.
Up to this point, we've outlined Goggins' approach, which operates on extreme, uncompromising self-discipline. Former SEAL Jocko Willink famously has a similar approach, saying, "I do not negotiate with weakness."
Which sounds great on a motivational poster when you're hitting the gym at 4 a.m.
It does.
Yeah.
But Fraser argues that if you apply that logic to any other relational context, where one party completely dominates, suppresses, and shuts out the voice of the other, it is the clinical definition of abuse.
Wow.
Fraser proposes that treating yourself this way over a span of decades is highly destructive to the nervous system.
Let's examine that critique. How does extreme discipline become self-abuse?
Well, Fraser views self-discipline as energy against yourself. You are essentially at war with a part of your own mind. Now, this works exceptionally well for young people or individuals breaking out of severe trauma or massive complacency, because they have abundant energy to burn in that internal war.
But as you get older...
Exactly. As you enter midlife, the biological and psychological landscape changes. Your unconscious mind, specifically your autonomic nervous system, monitors your allostatic load.
Which is the wear and tear on your body from chronic stress.
Right. It acts as a safety officer.
So instead of a governor limiting your running speed, this is like a master circuit breaker for your entire life.
A perfect way to frame it. Every cell in your body is hardwired for self-preservation. If your nervous system determines that your relentless, punishing drive is no longer safe, that the chronic cortisol release is going to destroy your cardiovascular health or your marriage, it will pull the plug.
Wait, really?
You will experience a sudden, profound drop in motivation, severe brain fog, or massive self-sabotage. You aren't being weak. Your biology is literally restricting you to prevent catastrophic system failure.
You hit a wall that no amount of reaching into the cookie jar can fix, because the wall is made of your own survival instincts.
Exactly. So Fraser advocates that for sustainable integration in midlife, you must shift from self-discipline to self-permission.
But that sounds like giving yourself permission to be lazy.
It's not about lowering your standards. It's about aligning your internal energy so you aren't constantly fighting yourself.
How do you do that?
He outlines 4 safety checks required to get that permission from your unconscious. First, rebuilding trust with yourself, stopping the internal betrayal and honoring your own boundaries.
Okay.
Second, ending neediness, becoming your own steady source of validation rather than seeking it through extreme external achievements.
Right.
Third, playing the right games, quitting the toxic games you hate, and defining your own authentic rules for winning. And fourth, developing a congruent avatar, actually evolving into the person capable of playing those games joyfully.
So are Goggins and Fraser actually opposed philosophies, or are they just teaching for different seasons of the human experience?
That's a profound way to look at it.
I mean, do you need Goggins's absolute warfare to break out of mediocrity, to smash through the heavy barriers of a terrible childhood or deep complacency? But you need Fraser's peace treaty to survive midlife without burning out your adrenal system.
Exactly. We aren't here to declare one framework inherently superior to the other. There are different tactical tools for different psychological states.
Right.
Goggins provides the ultimate blueprint for defying physical and mental limits when your baseline is broken or complacent. He proves, with documented evidence, that the human machine is capable of exponentially more than we are comfortable believing.
And Fraser provides the blueprint for sustainable longevity once those limits have been shattered.
Precisely.
Which brings us to the ultimate synthesis, our mental toughness framework. If we boil Goggins' philosophy down to its absolute core, it's this. Life is a complex mind game played solely against yourself, and suffering is the exact biological and psychological mechanism that forces growth.
You don't avoid the fire, you intentionally step into it to forge your own greatness.
Because the transformation occurs precisely because you are forcing your brain to adapt to environments it perceives as threatening, you are manually overriding millions of years of evolutionary programming designed to keep you soft and safe.
So if you want to test this framework in your own life this month, we have a 30-day challenge for you.
Let's hear it.
Start with the baseline. Force the ego out of the room. Tag your accountability mirror tonight. Be brutally honest about where you are failing.
I love that.
Then, systematically introduce micro-frictions daily to callous your mind. Take the cold shower, run the extra mile when it's raining.
Audit your time and block your schedule in strict 15-minute intervals to cut the multitasking fat.
And finally, the next time you want to quit a grueling workout, a complex work project, or studying for an exam, push past the 40% governor. Give just 10% more than your brain is telling you is possible.
If you actively apply that framework, you will undeniably alter the trajectory of your potential. You will see firsthand that the limits you perceive are largely illusions, constructed by a brain trying to keep you comfortable.
You literally rewrite the code of your own limits.
But as you step into the fire to forge your own greatness, as you tape up those torn hands and stare down the reflection in the mirror, ask yourself this. Once the mind is fully callous to the pain, how do you make sure you don't lose your ability to feel the good things too?